Whoa, controversial PP video. These concerns and ideas come from my own personal opinion, that is all. This comes as no surprise, but my favorite area in all of RuneScape has always been the wilderness. Ever since I heard about its high-risk, high-reward concept, I was immediately hooked. But as the years have gone by, I've become more and more discouraged by the direction that the wilderness has been heading. Not to say that Jagex hasn't been trying, but I feel like they're missing the core aspect of what makes wilderness so great. And that's what I'm going to be discussing today. But first, I thought I'd let you know that this is currently my alt account, as PP Slayer is on a different mission.
Hello, PP.
Whoops, wrong Wait, how do you know my name?
I'm a fortune teller. I know everything there is to know about you.
Well, in that case, can you tell me a bit about my past? I had too much trauma to remember any of it.
Let's see. Yes, I see it now. You're in high school. You're playing a game on your 4th gen iPod Touch. It's called Clans of Clash?
Oh yeah, Clash of Clans. I used to play that a lot in high school.
Interesting. I see so many good things for this game.
Yeah, so what about...
Such a bright future. Even to this day, the game still has over 2 million daily active users.
Are you turning this into a Clash of Clans sponsor?
And so many events. Just a few months ago, they had a world championship with a prize pool of $1 million.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now can we talk about...
It looks like the game is now better than ever. You can sail out to a whole new base that has a new battle system, new warrior abilities, and new defenses.
All right, I'll re-download the game. Now can you please tell me what the next 5 years of my life are going to be like?
Yeah, I was kind of focusing on Clash of Clans because, well... Oh, your free trial just ended. Bye-bye.
Great. Clash of Clans. After hearing they were going to be sponsoring the next video, I immediately had to boot it up again. It only took a few minutes to realize why this game was so addicting back then, and now I'm fully hooked back onto it and enjoying the years of content that I'd missed. And there is a ton of it. So if you'd like to join in too, go ahead and check out the link in the description. Thanks again to Clash for sponsoring this video. So let's talk about risk versus reward. On July 26, 2018, Jagex released the Wilderness Weapons, 3 powerful weapons that had massive DPS boosts that only took effect while in the Wildy. However, they needed to be charged with Revenant Ether that was always lost on death, so you needed to have a base risk of 200,000 GP to use these weapons. It was, in my opinion, an amazing risk versus reward update that felt very worthwhile. In addition to the weapons, we received the Amulet of Avarice, an amulet with the stats of a glory, but the special ability of noting drops in the Revenant Caves. The downside was that you would be skulled the entire time you wore this amulet. The trade-off for this item was nowhere near as good as the Wildy weapons, especially not at the time, but it did further enforce this idea of the more you risk, the more reward you receive. That update is nearly 5 years old now, and it's the last time Jagex put items into the wilderness that had this risk versus reward formula. With the release of the Wildy bosses, I was expecting a nice pool of items that could further delve into this formula. However, that was not the case. Not only do the bosses themselves not offer a scaling risk mechanic like the revs do, but none of them dropped a single unique that could improve your experience inside of the wilderness at a higher cost. The rev weapon upgrades were just that. Upgrades, and were nowhere near as exciting of an upgrade as the original Wildy weapons were. The Void Waker was a great addition for both PKing and anti-PKing, but there's so much wasted loot potential that could still be implemented into these bosses. There could be a scaling loot mechanic where after 5 kills in an arena, your base loot improves by 25%, then after 10 kills it improves by 50%, and after 20 kills it hits a cap of 75%. This way, there is always a reason for you to stay and risk getting more KC because you're getting rewarded to do so. One of the uniques from the bosses could have been a Blighted Blessing, an item held in the ammo slot that reduces the cost of the Wildy weapons by 50%, but needs 2,000 Rev Ether to be charged. This way, the item will pay for itself if you aren't dying too often. And here's my spiciest drop, an ultra-rare ring that serves as an Amulet of Avarice on steroids. With this ring, every single drop in the wilderness would be doubled. Mine a Rune Rock, you get 2. Kill a Revenant and it drops an Ancient Relic, you get 2. It sounds overpowered, right? Well, here's the catch. The ring is always lost on death. On top of this, it would give you a unique purple skull. This skull lets everyone know that you are in fact using the ring. This would be the pinnacle of high risk, high reward. Since the ring would be extremely rare, it would hold a very high value, more than likely in the 1 to 200 mil range. It would be so risky that bot farms wouldn't dare to use it in fear of losing the item. In fact, most regular wilderness goers might steer clear of it. But it sets a real precedent for what the wilderness should be. Unimaginable wealth, but only at the highest cost. Now, this isn't to say that people who don't wish to risk should be barred from the wilderness. I think the wilderness is currently in a great spot right now for lower level accounts that need to make some money. Rev Caves is by far the best money maker for low level accounts, and you don't have to risk much to get into it. All I'm asking for is there to be options for those who want to go the extra mile. The current rev caves have an almost perfect balance of this. If you wish to bring a basic risk setup, you can go on something like this and make a fairly good amount of money. But if you want to really start making cash, you'd go in a setup like this. The Avarice would give you 2 to 3 max hits over the regular Salve Amulet, and the skull that the Avarice provides will boost your rates for Wildy weapons and ancient emblems. Furthermore, the noted drops and food resupply allows for you to stay in the caves for as long as you are willing. For some that could be 200 kills, and for others that could be over 2,000. But the point is that the decision is up to you. And by risking more, the wilderness has made things more lucrative and more convenient for you. Now let's compare that to the Wildy bosses. For starters, I'd like to say that mechanically, I think the Wildy bosses are much more enjoyable to do, especially Vedion. But after doing over 200 kills, I can confidently say that the resupply drops are nowhere near enough to sustain yourself. There's no item effect at the new bosses that's similar to the Avarice at Revenants, no item that incurs a risk for more DPS or more loot, and finally there's no added convenience to the player for risking more at the bosses. In fact, it's more of an inconvenience as you make yourself a bigger target. But I've talked enough about the Wildy bosses. I'd like to also touch on a lot of dead areas that Jagex has pretty much neglected for a very long time now. My main gripe is going to be with the entirety of Deep Wildy. Why has it been left to die like this? There is one thing worth doing in this entire area, and that's Dark Crabs with Elite Diary done. Everything else is just so useless. There's no reason to woodcut or mine in the resource area because the guilds have better yields and better rates. The Magic Axe Hut has 0 good drops, the Rogue's Castle is a really cool spot, but the loot from its chests are horrid, and the 2 bosses, Scorpia and Chaos Ellie, are some of the least lucrative bosses in the game. It makes no sense to me that the deepest and most dangerous area of the wilderness is also the least rewarding. I really can't believe that it's gone on like this for so long. How hard would it be to add Rune or Dragon Scimitar drops to the Pirate drop table? Or to add Rune and Dragon Battle Axe drops to the Magic Axe loot table? Or at the very least improve the yields in the resource areas so that it's not completely outclassed by safe areas outside of the Wildy? There's potential for the Rogue's Castle to be a high-risk way to train the thieving skill, or the Agility course to actually give competitive XP rates while also being good money. Little tweaks like this would go so far and make the Wildy as a whole more worthwhile, instead of just being 1 or 2 hotspots. Speaking of hotspots, let's direct our attention to the Wildy Slayer Cave. Recently, you may have noticed that I've made a few videos about this cave, mostly about the new Slayer monsters that were implemented into it. Well, there's a reason as to why both of these videos have remained almost entirely inside of this cave. It's because pretty much every single task outside of the caves is just not worth doing. Outside of the cave, you have lower Laren's key drop rates, longer respawn timers, and more spread out enemies. For example, did you know that the respawn timer of Ents is a whopping 1 minute and 30 seconds long? That's the same respawn timer as the God Wars dungeon bosses. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, regular Slayer has bad tasks too, which is true, but this is the wilderness we're talking about here. It should always be the best option for a player training the Slayer skill, because if it isn't, then what's the point? Why risk your items for a reward that just isn't there, or isn't enough to be worthwhile? The final thing I'd like to talk about is people feeling like the wilderness should stop baiting PVMers inside of it and just let it be a PvP area. To this, I'd like to say that the wilderness was never meant to be just for PvP. It was a byproduct of what is a risky area. From the very first day it was implemented into the game, it had rune rocks, which were the only material that could craft the best in slot armor at the time. Having really good rewards is not something new. In fact, today's wilderness is very tame compared to the OG wilderness. Can you imagine the outrage if a new best in slot armor came from Wildy? The riots would be hilarious. Jokes aside though, the Wildy is high risk, high reward, and there are lots of people who enjoy that playstyle. If you don't, then that's perfectly fine. Just don't try ruining it for the rest of us. I'll leave off with this quote from Jagex from 2001 upon the wilderness's release. The further you go into the wilderness, the more dangerous it becomes, but the more treasure you could find. How much of a risk you want to take is entirely up to you. Check out this trailer. The new Accursed Scepter and Thamaran Staff now have an upgraded 50% damage bonus in the Wildy with the ability to auto-cast ancient magics. So I bought myself the Scepter, the Max Mage, and obtained 2,200 Slayer points that I can do nothing but barraging tasks for up to 10 hours. Huge thanks to Mr. Snowmiser, Hamster King 5, Mia IRL, and Samuel Peterson.